Thank you for all the good energy and the positivity and the cardio that we just did. It's great to have everyone in the house today. Please feel at home. Please feel at home. There's food, there's coloring, there's bubbles, there's boards, there's a lot of opportunity for discussion. And I also want to mention, we are working with our floaty screen, and because there's so much light coming in, it can be hard to see. So I want to invite you, if you feel like you're having a hard time seeing the screen, please feel free to come up, take a look at the screen, or you can stand on the sides to get a better view. So I'm going to kick us off by just saying thank you again to Refresh Collective. Thank you to the Pivot Center for hosting us today, and Inlet Dance Theater, where we are in this room. Thank you to Cafe Social, who's providing all the food and the snacks, and thank you for the childcare and the kid program, because kids are a part of our city, and this is their future. Just a little bit about what we're here to do today. On the screen, you may see that we're going to talk a little bit about the vision, our process. We'll turn it over to Keisha to talk about the bridge and the engineering. We'll turn it over to Lisa to talk about the planning process, and then we'll have a lot of fun just interacting and working with the boards and the pictures in the back. So if we could keep going to the next slide. All of us are guided by the vision of the mayor. So Mayor Bibb's vision for the lakefront is what is guiding and inspiring this effort. And the mayor really believes that the waterfront can be a source of healing for Cleveland's communities. And that, that healing can be interpreted in the way that you interpret, right? The guiding principles of racial equity, of economic development, and also resiliency, those are the guiding values from the mayor. And we want to hear from you too about what values are guiding your vision and dreams, our vision and dreams for the lakefront. It's a very complex project. It's very complex because not only roads and what we call infrastructure, but we also want to create an experience at the lakefront. So there are two processes that are going on at the very same time. Over here, on your left, you see the goal of understanding how we will get there. And the how we will get there has to do a lot with the engineering, the roads, the trees, how do we get there? And our goal today is to learn which bridge location and what the shoreway operation you prefer is. Then there's a second process on your right, and it's the what we'll do there. What will we as a community do there? The goal is to learn about your values, your vision, the stories that you or your community members, your elders, or your kids have, and the desired activities at the lakefront and the connector. If you are part of the team, whether you're on the how you get there or what you'll do there, if you could raise your hands just so people know, these are the people who have been very involved in the project, and they will be a part of answering your questions and guiding you today. So Osborne Engineering is the engineering firm and the lead, and then James Corner Field Operations is the lead on the planning. We also have Third Space Action Lab. I see Mordecai right there. We have Murphy Epson and Compass Consulting. These are the folks working on our engagement and making sure that voices are heard. And then finally, the City of Cleveland. The city is leading the projects you see before you. We have a few of us in the room that are going to be guiding and a part of this discussion today. Okay, a little bit more about where we're focusing on today. On the screen is the little dot in the center is where's the downtown lakefront. And if we zoom in a little bit more, put on your Google Maps aerial view. So you're an eagle flying in the air, looking down at the lakefront. The big circular thing above is the Brown Stadium. The lines moving across are the roads and the shoreway. And if you can just put yourself at the lakefront, what you see ahead of you is the water and various roads and tracks. For more than 100 years, we've made plans to better connect our downtown, our neighborhood downtown to the lakefront. With your help, we have the opportunity to realize these dreams and work together to really make it happen this time. Here's where we are with project schedules. So, if I can point, you are here. You are here, we are here, we are here, spring 2023. So you can see that the engineering analysis for the bridge and the roads has already started in 2022. And we are just getting started on the planning process. And that's why we're here today, to really kick it off and hear from you about the vision and the values. And throughout that time and continuing on, we are going to be working with you all to hear from you through the process. Okay, there's a few different ways to engage. You're here at the public meeting. We'll have briefings, meaning that we'll meet with your group. So please invite us to meet with your group. We'll have one-on-one interviews. We have focus groups. We'll have community events in the summertime. We have in-person and online surveys, and you can also sign up for announcements at the website. Lots of ways to engage. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Assistant Director Keisha Chambers, who's going to walk through the connector, which is, again, the how we'll get there.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, good afternoon, and thank you all for coming to hear about this wonderful project. So in order to get this going, we had to figure out a couple of things. One is the purpose. Why are we doing this work? What is it for? We settled on the items that you see here. One is to increase connectivity. So as Joyce mentioned, how do we get there? So this increase of creativity can be by vehicles, but we're really looking at pedestrians, we're looking at bicycles, and we want to make sure that as people are moving towards the lake, that they're safe. They're going to get there in a safe manner. And we want to be able to, once they get there, there's something to do. Maybe they go to a restaurant, maybe they shop a little bit, and that will inspire some economic and redevelopment along the lakeshore. And so as we were going through this process, we had to figure out what is the primary need for this? Why is the city investing in this? And as I mentioned, it was to make sure we get there, to energize people getting there. You know, when you're there, when you're proceeding to that space, you're looking forward to being there, you know the way that you're traveling is safe, and you have a straight connection to get to that point. And we'll be able to also promote climate resilient development, low carbonization too, as we do this work. So through the bicycling, through pedestrians, that's our climate resilient effort. And some of the secondary needs includes just improving the transit and rail connectivity. Right now, there's definitely a gap between if you want to go take the train, the RTA, then you want to get to the lake. You know, we want to make sure that those connections are better. We want to improve freight connectivity. You know, there's a major railroad there that Amtrak comes through there, if anybody knew that part. RTA travels that, so we want to make sure that there's a rail connectivity, create more safe movement along that route, and also to foster equity of the lakefront. And I think you will hear that theme throughout. We want the lakefront to be equitable for everybody to enjoy. So basically, what is a land bridge? A land bridge is still a bridge, so it's connecting you over something, but the activity that happens on that bridge isn't just for the movement of cars. This activity could be a park. It could be, you know, a lookout. It could be anything we think of. That's why we're here today. We're coming to think about what could this land bridge be about. And it can also just be a simple cap where they do need extra space to create opportunities for a business. So in Columbus, if you've been to Columbus, this is actually a land bridge. They have restaurants that go across this bridge. So it took me a couple of times to realize I'm on a bridge because it really does blend into the environment that is already there. Another example is in St. Louis. Actually, to the right of this picture is the Arc. And so this is the Gateway Arc Park, I think I'm saying that right. And this is a bridge that runs under that park. And my favorite in this collection is in Clyde Warren Park, which is in Dallas, Texas, my home city. And so I have been here a couple of times to enjoy this park, and it is beautiful in how it blends, it connects the downtown because the freeway went right through downtown. So this gives an opportunity to connect the downtown, but it also really creates a neighborhood. You know, gives you a great feeling of community in this space. And so next we will talk about the engineering, and we have challenges on the board, but I've been telling Vicki, we're gonna say engineering opportunities, because this project is really an opportunity for us to do something different within this city, to use some of our skills, our engineering knowledge, as Vicki's a part of that, to bring something forth to the city.
Okay. She'll be back. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to be showing you a video. Oh, and I have to put my glasses on so I can read what I'm about to see what I'm about to read. So we're going to show you a short video that highlights some of the engineering opportunities that we'll face in building a land bridge. And so this video begins at Mall C, looks at Mall B, and then to the end of the fountain on Mall A. And for those of you who might not be quite sure where Mall B is, remember a few years ago when the Cavs won the championship and we had that big parade and they ended it with speeches on a platform in front of a huge crowd? That's where Mall B is. So with that, let's start the video. And as our view moves towards the fountain and then back to Mall C, we come upon the edge of the bluff overlooking the lakefront. And as we move towards the lakefront, we see our bridge needs to span both the rail lines and the shoreway. To meet criteria, the bottom of our land bridge needs to be 23.5 feet above the rail lines and 16.5 feet above the shoreway pavement. As we slope down towards the lakefront, we also need to keep the bridge at a relatively flat slope to meet ADA criteria. To give you an idea how much lower the lakefront is from Mall C, the elevation difference between the mall to the top of the Great Lakes Science Center parking garage, where you see the sidewalk running towards the lake there, is 65 feet. And that's not even to ground level. So as we end the video, you can see the open area north of the Science Center and the stadium that's just waiting for us to happen. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Keisha. Okay, and we are running the video at the back table, so if you can't quite see it on here, you can see it again.
So before we even got to this point, there was already a series of public meetings that took place. And during these meetings, we were trying to figure out what this would look like. So you start kind of from one point, and you go through different iterations to determine what your final selection will be. And we're following the process from the Ohio Department of Transportation as far as looking at the feasible alternatives for this project. So at the first part of this, we were able to identify 4 concepts, and we had to neatly place them in buckets because in each concept there were multiple options and iterations. So concept A was no land bridge, no change, and basically this is a requirement for ODOT. You have to just kind of consider, we're not going to do anything. The second bucket is build land bridge over the existing shoreway. Oh, we already got a question. Yes, I can. And we're going to come into some visuals here that'll help with that question. So B is build land bridge over existing shoreway. So the traffic stays the same. All of the components stay the same. We just build a land bridge. Bucket C is build land bridge. Shoreway becomes a boulevard. And we'll talk about what a boulevard is versus what a shoreway is. And then D, build land bridge, remove shoreway entirely. So it would just be a bridge and just, I guess, a street that would be under that bridge. So as before, the initial screening criteria was make sure that pedestrians can move safely through this connectivity opportunity, support economic development, create new public green space, maintain direct vehicular connectivity to East 9th, and provide acceptable vehicular movement downtown. So going into this process with these initial criterias, once we got to bucket A, this is something that is not feasible. So as Joyce mentioned, the mayor has a vision for this. We do have an effort and initiative to move this forward. So A is not viable, but because of ODOT, we do leave it into the consideration and in the discussion. Bucket B, build land bridge and keep shoreway as is. Is this map helping everyone to see what the limits are? Bucket B, concept 1, there is a land bridge, which we call the Greenbelt Coalition. Greenbelt is an organization that did some work earlier, and their concept is to have a land bridge that's in a diagonal placement that goes over the shoreway. And then bucket B, concept B2, is to convert East 9th to a land bridge. This was dropped, as I mentioned the criteria before, and this one was dropped because of the lack of connectivity opportunities for this project. Bucket B, concept B3, is the north-south alignment. So this is just keeping the bridge straight across. The video, the flyover went straight across from the malls going over to the lake. So this is a part of one of our bucket options, and this was considered feasible. Another option that was in bucket B was to actually convert the shoreway to a tunnel, and this presented a variety of issues as far as how long the tunnel would be in order to make sure that we were able to meet engineering criteria, and this was dropped because it was not going to be able to meet those engineering criteria. Bucket C, moving into different buckets. So that was bucket B options, and all of those were related to the land bridge, the shoreway. And now we're going to move into bucket C, also some land bridge and shoreway options. So yet again, build the land bridge and the shoreway becomes a boulevard. So very similar, but some configurations are different between B and C. So going into the boulevard question, what is a boulevard? A boulevard is just a wider road, okay? And this differs from the shoreway because the shoreway does not allow for development or driveways to come into that road. The boulevard also has a median. Oftentimes that median will be grass, but it can also be a turn lane, especially if we're trying to create more development opportunities, maybe housing or retail. We may want a turn lane to help access the flow of traffic. And here are some boulevard renderings. We can have a 3-lane configuration or a 2-lane configuration, both showing a median or turn lane in the middle. And what potentially will happen for the shoreway is that we will be, for the boulevard, we will making sure that it aligns with our current boulevard as you travel further west along the roadway. And so as we were going through bucket C and looking at these concepts, another one that came up was to have the boulevard stop at West 3rd Street. This also had some impacts to the flow of traffic, so this one was dropped as well. Same concept, but just extending the boulevard to end at East 8th. This one too had some traffic connectivity concerns. So coming out of bucket C, the two viable options are to continue to Main Avenue Bridge. So to have the boulevard continue to the Main Avenue Bridge. Another viable option was bucket C, boulevard continues to Main Avenue Bridge and extends to East 18th Street. So this will require a reconfiguration of East 18th Street, and meaning that we are actually connecting East 18th Street to the future boulevard. For bucket D, build land bridge, but remove the shoreway entirely, and this was also dropped because I do believe that's obvious traffic connectivity issue. So from the iterations that happened at the public meetings, I'm looking at it through also an engineering lens and seeing what our viable options would be. These are the two items that stayed as our feasible alternatives that were included in our feasibility study, and that was sent to the Ohio Department of Transportation. So these two concepts are build land bridge over the existing shoreway, or build a land bridge and the shoreway becomes a boulevard. So as we continue with our studies, we will see which one of these is the most viable and continue our engineering. So that leads to the next step, continuing engineering and traffic operation analysis. We'll conduct environmental studies to consider what the impacts are. We'll continue to engage in the public like we're doing now. We have this meeting. We have one next Tuesday and a virtual one on the 11th. We will also assess multiple factors, including pedestrian and bicycle movements, and how we can connect these projects to other current projects that are happening from the county as well as from the city, and how we can make sure that there's continuity between the projects, specifically around our pedestrian and bicycle pathways. Additional next steps, but wait, there's more. So some of our other next steps are to identify and estimate property impacts. So we have an appraiser on board who will look at the properties that are in the area. What will we need? What space do we need to actually make this project happen? We will expand and refine our evaluation criteria. So as I mentioned before, this is iterative. This is something we keep coming back and looking at, and this is one of those projects where you keep asking why. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And how is it impacting our community? So we will continue that process. We will use public input and technical analysis to refine the feasibility alternatives. So that's the why. You will be telling us your feedback, and we'll be incorporating that into our design as we move forward. Our findings will be reported in September. So the feasibility study then becomes a selected alternative study, which also goes to the Ohio Department of Transportation. So the engineering analysis that we've done, the feedback that we get from you will thus go into a study, go into recommendations that we will be sending forth. And at the end of this year, that's our timeline. If you remember the timeline that you saw on the chart that Joyce showed you, end of this year, we will be completing that report. And so at that point, we will know between the two alternatives, which one the city will be supporting to move forward into design, moving forward into design. And next, we'll have the JCFO office, which I always get those acronyms confused. Lisa will come up and speak. Should we keep this one?
Thank you, Keisha, and Joyce. So my name's Lisa. I'm with, we can just say field operations, it's easier. We're a landscape architecture and urban design firm based in New York, but we've actually been working in Cleveland for over 15 years. You hopefully have seen and worked on some of the spaces that we helped create, including the revitalization of Public Square. I think you can just press that. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about the master plan, or really the planning process that we have just started. So we're really thrilled to be here and to sort of be part of this opportunity. It's an incredible responsibility that we feel to really realize the significance, the vision, and the potential for this final sort of access to the lakefront right here in downtown. I just wanted to recognize members of our team who are here. Our local partner is Robert P. Madison International. I know there's a couple of you here, so they're our partner in this effort along with other consultants. A couple things about us. I mean, as I said, we not only have had a sustained relationship here in Cleveland, but we've had a lot of relevant projects, including building over significant highways, shoreways, tunnels. The Presidio Tunnel Tops in San Francisco is a 14-acre cap or land bridge that goes all the way from the Presidio down to the Crissy Field waterfront. You may know of our work on the High Line in New York and Domino Park in New York, as well as the Seattle Central waterfront, which is all dealing with similar issues. And each one has their own character and their sort of uniqueness that draws off of the places that they are. But in some ways, I think it's comforting to know and realize that there are many cities who are grappling with very similar issues of really neighborhoods and communities being severed from their waterfronts through large-scale infrastructure projects that happened, whether it was railroads, highways, et cetera. So the purpose of the master plan, again, I think that Grace already touched on this, but we wanted to sort of punch out a couple things that the master plan is trying to do. First and foremost, of course, and with the connector, improving access and connectivity to the lakefront. Second is really creating a resilient and probably even more importantly, a welcoming destination that really belongs to everyone. And then the third piece of that is also unlocking this potential. There's a lot of sort of vacant and underutilized land here. And so the idea that there are economic development opportunities that could happen. And this administration in particular is looking at ways to do that in ways that are equitable, affordable, and not just, for, I think, what some people might think has been some of the past plans. So this is the site again. I know you can't see it. I was like thinking to myself, it's a beautiful day, there's sun, and like the one problem with a sunny day is that there's so much light in here you can't see the screen. We've already gone over this, but what I wanted to sort of talk about, just so you get in your head, the slice that you can see along the airport side is about 1 mile. So if you take the mall going back to the airport, it's about a mile. And then along the stadium, basically the lakefront side of the stadium, is about 1/3 of a mile. So just to get that kind of sense in your head of the scale of this project, some of you have probably been to the games and you kind of maybe have sort of seen that space, but when you see it from the mall, it might feel small, but when you're there, it's actually an incredibly powerful and quite large site along the lakefront that has really never been accessible or used to everybody before. We've also, so I think our process is really that we always start with a really deep and understanding of the place. And we do this through our own research and analysis. We do it through immersion of sort of, being in the place, being on the site, and also engaging with partners and communities. So we're really committed to this idea of listening first. We're not showing you any design today on purpose because we want to hear from you first, because that will guide our thinking. But we've also spent about 2 months or so reviewing data, meeting with people, sort of creating our own research and drawings, and we wanted to share a snapshot of that with you, basically to kind of hopefully get to spark your ideas, but they're meant to be a kind of starting point or a jumping point. We really realize and acknowledge that there's a lot of gaps in this, and so part of the boards and things that we have out there is for you to kind of help us fill some of those gaps. It's a really exciting time for the city. When we first sort of saw this diagram, which I don't know if you can see, but it has all these bubbles going all along the lakefront. It's basically showing that there's a real opportunity to kind of seize this moment and leverage all of these different city, county, independent initiatives that are happening to create this kind of energy and more holistic vision for the lakefront. In addition, we kind of wanted to start back. So we started our kind of look at the lakefront. I think a lot of people start with like the 1903 plan, and we're like, well, civilization did not start in the 1900s. So we wanted to acknowledge that, downtown Cleveland, as we know it today, actually sits at the crossroads of the Cuyahoga River and Lake Erie. This is an incredibly spiritual and important place, right, where these two places come together. And some of the sort of early indigenous trails were known as the Lakeshore Trail, the Cuyahoga Path, and the Mahoning Trail. They were all sort of based on the natural features. They were kind of in the low-lying areas, in the valleys, related to the lake, to the water, etc. And these maps are really beautiful. They call out these kind of key natural and cultural features that were how the marks on the land were made. In addition, many of you probably know this, but Ohio was a key player in the operations of the Underground Railroad. These maps are incredibly interesting because you can kind of see this concentration of these routes that crisscross through the state. And it's right here in Ohio, and that was by no surprise, of course, because ultimately passing through Cleveland, which was also known as Station Hope, was this promise of passage across the lake and into Canada and freedom. We've also been looking at Green Book Cleveland, and so what's really interesting is that, for those who aren't aware of what Green Book Cleveland is, these were a series of book guides written by Victor Green, and they were meant to sort of, they were published in 1936 through 1936 to 66, and they really were to help Black motorists in the area know where places could go, where they could go that they would feel safe and not be harassed. And two sites that were noted in Green Book Cleveland were the 9th Street Pier, East 9th Street Pier, which is right in this area, as well as the public hall, right? So we wanted to call out a few things from Green Book Cleveland because I think this notion of East 9th Street Pier is really interesting. There used to be a series of moonlight cruises and breakfast cruises that used to come and arrive at the East 9th Street Pier, and that was sort of always a center of activity and a place especially where Black people felt safe. We also wanted to sort of note that the first Asia town was actually right in this site area. It was established when Chinese Americans began arriving in the city, which was as early as 1860, and they settled along the lakeside and St. Clair Avenue. Over time, this has sort of continually been sort of migrated further and further away from downtown, but that historic center used to be right adjacent in our site. I love these images because Cleveland was once known and really felt as a city on the lake. And you can see here in some of these images that these range from 1797 to about 1915. There was this palpable kind of sense of park and open space right at the water's edge. The North Coast Harbor has also been host to a number of uses over the past 130 years. So I'm just going to highlight a few of them. You know, it was in 1895, it was the Cleveland Yachting Club. In the 1915s, it became a railroad terminal. In 1931, that's when the municipal stadium came on board. And one of the things that we found really interesting was that in 1936 to 37, there was the Great Lakes Exposition, and this featured hundreds of attractions over 135 acres of the site. There was a new land bridge that was built as part of that, and there was actually rides and cafes and pavilions and all these things that kind of happened at the lakefront. So one of the things that I think is interesting, and this is not uncommon, many cities have this. If you go around the world and you see kind of a street that's called Front Street or Water Street, that's usually where the city used to end, and everything beyond that is now fill or urban fill. Same thing for Cleveland. So there's been a couple key events and moments in history that have contributed to this evolving city and shoreline, from the first piers that were built with part of the railroads, to the breakwater construction that you see there today that help with the navigation channel, to land reclamation, and even the completion of the Burke Airport. We made this drawing ourselves just to begin to understand like that line. So I don't know if you can see it, but this line here is actually the 1850 historical bluff. And everything beyond that in different pieces has been reclaimed land over time, basically fill that was then now developed. This, of course, contributed to kind of continuing to kind of push the bluff or the downtown further away from the lake, and is part of these, you know, continual issues that we suffer from today. And then with the railroads and the highways, there was also additional sort of cutoffs from the neighborhood to the lake. So there's been no shortage of plans for this area. One of the first things we did was start to overlay our site over all of the different initiatives and plans that have been done since the 1903 group plan. And this was done by Daniel Burnham, and there was this desire to extend to the lakefront even then. That mall connection was always envisioned to go all the way to the lake. More plans, all the way up until 2021. So this is the moment in time where we're saying we're actually going to do it. And we're not going to do it based on all these other interests. We're going to do it also, you know, the goal of this plan as put forward by this administration was that it be community driven, which is a very different goal than previous plans. One of the things that we started to do, though, because there's still been a lot of work and there's a lot of valid information with each plan that was done, so we have been sort of looking at them with both an eye towards how we can sort of rethink them anew and refresh them, and at the same time understand certain things that happen in each of them with an understanding that they probably happened for a reason, and sometimes those reasons were actually really smart reasons, and sometimes those reasons were, you know, other reasons that maybe aren't even applicable today. But this was a map that we made where you can kind of see different site uses or commonalities between all of those 20 plus plans that we showed you before. So there's a series of mixes of uses. You can start to see a lot of them had connections in very similar places. A lot of them had sort of parks in very similar places. A lot of them had mixed use along the lakefront as an opportunity, et cetera. We also kind of overlaid all of the different development sites. So this is like a heat map. I guess if you were to take every single development site from all of those plans and put them on a plan, It basically covered everything with development. But you can see, well, you probably can't see, but there's areas that are darker red than others, and that's where, when you overlay them, you see where most plans cited development. And by development, I basically mean buildings. So in order to we've summarized a couple case studies. We wanted these to help kind of prompt and initiate a conversation about uses and activities for both the lakefront as well as the land bridge. So we're going to share a couple of these with you. These are all similar in scale to the site that we're looking at as part of the Cleveland Lakefront North Coast Master Plan. But what's interesting is all of them show a mix of uses. So they have different percentages and ratios based on the values, economic climate, and other things with each of those cities. Some are more urban, some are more sort of natural, some are more eventful and kind of performance and events are very active, others are more passive. Each one sort of has this unique character and identity that really reflects the cities and their context and their region and their ecology and their people and culture. And so all of those things we sort of want you to have in mind. So this is the Detroit East Riverfront. You can see that here the development percent, which is all the red, looks high, but in the pie wheel it's about 17% of the site. And you can kind of see the other areas related to gardens, lawns, kind of tree canopy, as well as hardscape. So you can kind of see this desire to have a kind of green edge along the riverfront, with development kind of tucked back a bit. Another example is the Toronto Central Waterfront. So here too, you sort of have this mix, although here it's much more heavy leaning towards both development and hardscape. There isn't quite as continuous of like a green line along the water's edge, but instead there's kind of these significant green parks that are kind of mixed throughout. And so that's another way to sort of think about green space, et cetera. This is the Chicago Riverwalk, which bridges both sides of the river. Here too, the development mix or the building mix is about 30%. The hardscape is about 37%. So you have sort of limited green space, which is really, I think, a product of just the constrained space that they have. But it's integrated in ways that are actually both performance, ecological, and at the same time really beautiful and contribute to the experience of the place. We also wanted to share a couple more examples of land bridges, but not necessarily in terms of like what they can be, but more about their programs, uses, and character. So this is actually a really interesting one because it's almost the exact same width and length of the malls in terms of the width, and then the length in terms of the length we have from the malls to touchdown to the lakefront. And so each one is, again, unique, but here we're kind of looking at, this is the Lower Rainier Land Bridge. It's in Seattle. It's very simple. It's kind of this elegant gesture. It's more civic. It's kind of grand in its character, as well as its use. And it, too, was kind of connecting a very formal lawn to something else on the other side. And it kind of pinches like an hourglass where it crosses the street. Penn's Landing is a large project that's happening in downtown Philadelphia. This one is much more active. There's a number of features, elements, performance areas. It's really meant for festivals. They have a big potential ice rink that's going to be there. There's children's play areas, there's lawns, there's cafes, etc. Its width is greater than what we're talking about here, but it's also capping over the highway. The 11th Street Bridge is a bit of a different context because it's a bridge over water, not over a rail line. But we thought it was interesting, just again, in terms of prompting ideas, because this is really about creating this kind of iconic and activated destination that really leverages its position on the water. So finally, we just wanted to end with a couple of our observations, sort of, and some of the emerging priorities and prompts, again, to help aid with the activities and discussions that will follow the presentation. So the site challenges, this image I think is pretty explicit. This is the challenge in its sort of raw core. It's really moving from what was a bluff right? Which has been eroded, I think, both physically and kind of in perception over time, down to the lakefront. There's lots of other sort of issues with this. Not only the elevational change, there's this both psychological and physical barrier, right, from the lakefront. It's like this, like, it's close but so far away. There's issues in terms of the lakefront institutions are mostly fee-based, and we, you know, understanding that if we are trying to have it be welcoming for everyone, what is that impression? What does that say? Winter programming, it's very windy for those who have been there. We know that a lot of Clevelanders brave the winter, and that's great. My dad's from Chicago and my mom's from Montreal, so I too have that ingrained. And then there's also this idea of not only about connecting one direction, but that this project is really about, we say like core to shore to core. It's kind of like this multi-directional, that the two can strengthen each other instead of being seen as competitors with one another. There's a number of emerging kind of opportunities and priorities that we've pulled out. I'm not going to read all of these, but I'll kind of touch on them with some of the images that follow. But this notion of prioritizing the public realm and this, what we're calling inside-outside planning, lots of plans when they do a planning process start with the buildings, and then the public space sort of fills in everything between. We're trained as landscape architects and urban designers, so we actually start the other way around. We start with the public space first, we start with the critical connections first, and then we kind of work in and integrate the development. I mentioned that there's this idea of not only integrated, but really thoughtful and equitable development, which is incredibly important, not only to the success of this project, but also to the goals and values of the community and the administration. The idea of that strengthened connection back and forth between downtown and the lakefront, multimodal access and promoting, you know, kind of not only just thinking about cars, which is critically important and has to work, but how this also works for human-friendly pedestrian, bike, and also public transit, and making an affordable option to get to the lakefront. Telling and celebrating the whole history. This is something we actually really want your feedback on. So this idea of whole history is something that has come up. We didn't make this up. It's a kind of trend that's happening all over the world, but highlighting kind of gaps and lived experience, which are lesser known, to actually elevate those and give them equal weight to a lot of the stories that are told over and over again. So the lakefront has histories, some of which are known, some of which are not known, some of which are told, some of which are not told, as well as like there's a whole contemporary kind of thing happening now in terms of people's current experiences and also their ambitions for what it can be in the future. Foregrounding ecology and recognizing the lake itself as a stakeholder, fostering joy and activation. We want to have fun at the lakefront. And then embracing actually the water, but also the bluff. So the bluff has been seen as this barrier, rightfully so. But a bluff condition also has a lot of really like exciting aspects to it. The idea, there's a lot of cities whose identity, if they're on a bluff, is actually about the bluff, right? And the sort of views and vistas, and like using that as a procession to actually get down to the water. So again, as I guess Keisha was saying, thinking of it as an opportunity instead of a constraint. So these are just a couple images, again, to kind of just prompt a discussion. So this notion of embracing the bluff, this vista from the mall is a powerful one. What can we do to actually reinforce that and even strengthen it and heighten the drama of that condition? But also embracing the skyline. This is an image of being out in front of the Brown Stadium, and when you look back, you see the full sort of breadth of downtown Cleveland. Varying the shoreline and foregrounding ecology, this notion that, you know, this is, you have the breakwater there, which is actually, it's to help with navigation, but it actually allows us to be a calmer kind of area of the lake. So we could actually do things there that you couldn't do in areas where it's rougher. That's why all the surfers go to Edgewater, because there's no breakwater there. Celebrating the working waterfront. I mean, this is part of Cleveland. It's kind of amazing that there's this active port there, and there's a kind of excitement, even awe, to kind of seeing the operations there, and that's our neighbor on one side. Integrating thoughtful and equitable development. This is just sort of pulling out that there's a number of sites, whether it's the muni lots, sorry for those who are tailgaters, as well as other sites that could potentially be unlocked or opened up for different types of development opportunities. Centering equitable multimodal access. This is a moment where we could actually have a multimodal transit hub. All of the railroad partners, RTA, everyone is excited about actually concentrating this at this site, which would also help to kind of it be a public transit hub. Expanding water access, really exciting again for this area. There's a kind of lakefront trail here, but currently in lakefront access, like this part of the north coast is like this big missing tooth. Like you have all of the sites basically on this side and all of the sites on the north. And if you are trying to go, it's like very difficult in this stretch. Connecting the core to the shore and back. So this image is just helping to reinforce that idea and concept. Fostering joy and activation and embracing the winter. I love the guy with the chainsaw on the ice. Very impressive. I mean, I don't know how he gets that detail with that chainsaw. But light and kind of being out on the water, these are all things that can actually be, we've even seen in other cities where we've worked in Minneapolis and other places where they have light festivals out on frozen lakes and they sort of embrace that.
Round of applause for Lisa. Thank you.